Guys, we did it. We're we're live. We are live back on a Monday. I'm back from Guatemala, Central America. For those of you playing at home, or maybe if you're an A&M grad that just decided to sign on, we are going to talk a little bit of spring ball. In the words of Allen Iverson, we're talking practice. We're going to figure out what's going to happen moving forward. One of the things that a lot of people are really excited about during this time of year is obviously the new toys that Sarkisian has to play with, but also depth chart. I think it's probably safe to say that we are maybe a little early for some depth chart stuff, but it seems to be a topic on everybody's mind. What are we thinking here? What are the things in terms of a fan? We're looking at this and we're seeing all these people go through the various drills. When people are going through drills, do they often have to do they do that in order of depth chart, or they just go through the drill? There's been a lot of talk about that. What are our thoughts on that, Eric?
Often it is based on the depth chart, or kind of where it's just a basic standing of where they are currently, but it's not always the case. I've seen tight ends are all over the place, but I think it's interesting what Sark said today is he doesn't really want to talk about the two deep. He was as dismissive of that question as he possibly could be because he doesn't want anybody to get discouraged. He wants everybody to compete, and I understand that. But I can tell you right now, we have a very good working understanding of the two deep pretty much across the board. So we're free to speculate on that. But yeah, I mean that is a bit of a template when those guys are going in order. It gives you somewhat of an understanding. Today it was interesting in that Neto Umeozulu was over there ahead of Hayden Connor. That's not normally the case, but that doesn't really mean anything long term. Because Neto's not going to win that job unless they have a lot of scrimmages, or it probably will even go into August. So while these jobs are up for grabs, they're not really coming close to getting resolution on them.
Paul, we were just discussing your deep-seated hatred for children and puppies, and I'm just curious, obviously in punctuality, what in a spring ball practice are you looking for this early in the game? Is it simply like you don't want people to get hurt? You want to make sure that everything is flowing at a certain place. The new guys know what they're doing. I'm throwing you under the bus here a little bit and just tossing this out at you. What do you have to say about some spring practice?
I do actually love puppies. Testament to the fact that I was late. My dogs were in the backyard, and then a pack of coyotes were howling and kind of close, and they were going nuts and interacting with the wildlife and the fauna around here. So I had to go break it up. And
that's what kind of dog do you have, Paul?
3, 2 doodles and an Akita.
Oh, all right.
So the Akita would have done great. The doodles, I'm not so sure about.
Licked them to death.
Is this a hyperallergenic thing with you, Paul, in terms of the doodles, or is it just because of their fierce, cuddly nature that you tend to?
I love doodles
towards
dogs.
Yeah,
and the Akita gives me my man card. So
okay.
So your question is a good one. Honestly, I'm not looking for a specific thing until the pads come on and they really start going at it in earnest. And I think you have to give it a little time. There are people, consistency is a big part of this. And there are guys that are going to flash. And then 2 practices later, you don't hear much about them anymore, right? Because they just had that one practice. And Eric, tell me if I'm mistaken, but I think you and Joe are only getting to see limited periods. Is that correct?
Yeah, we were only able to see limited, and I was only at the first one. The second one was canceled due to weather, and then Joe was at the practice this morning that they allowed. Yeah, he had 20 minutes of viewing time, which doesn't tell you anything. What we're going off of a lot of times is what we're hearing from people that are watching every minute of it. We got some good feedback from what happened on Saturday, which they upped the intensity quite a bit. We could talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, I'm not, what you see in that first 20 minutes, you take with a grain of salt because it's what they want you to see.
Let's talk about that Saturday a little bit. Now that was am I right in saying that was the coaching clinic we had on Saturday? So
yeah, the coaching clinic Friday and Saturday, obviously Sean McVay spoke to, I think Sark said they had about 300 coaches in town. They had a number of recruits, and whenever that happens, you got to buckle your chin strap because, Sark is it's not going to be a lazy practice. Not that they ever really have those, but it's going to be there's going to be a little extra bounce in Sark's step. And they went from, lighter no pad practice to full pads and tackling to the ground in 3 periods. They didn't scrimmage, but they did do some good on good in simulated stuff like a team run, which is all run or play action. I think they did some goal line stuff like that. But it was definitely full contact, other than obviously quarterbacks, and it was pretty intense.
One thing that we cover a lot here is obviously the recruiting aspect with the players, but I'd love for you to expand a little bit. And this is really a question for all three of you, but I'll focus it first for you, Eric. When Sark is having these coaching clinics, that is a massive recruiting opportunity for him as well, from the vantage point of the coaches, getting them on board. Can you expand on even just this? Obviously was something that Mac did very, very well. What is the impression that you're getting and hearing from the Texas high school coaches about Sark and how he's using this as an advantage towards the recruiting aspect of things?
Well, first of all, it's a tremendous opportunity for the coaches, for the coaching staff, because you have all these guys going to see you. Normally they're on the road to go see them. And if you're lucky, if you meet four or five at a single stop, but here you have 300 all coming to you at once. Sark is widely liked. I haven't really heard any negatives from any coaches. He's widely liked in general. I don't think that the high school coaches are any different than the lay person that meets him at the Houston Touchdown Club or any of the other speaking engagements that he holds throughout the state. He comes across in press conferences. That's how he is in person. He's transparent, candid, and genuine, and that comes across well with everybody.
We'll switch across a little bit here because Ian, and again, I don't want to get you in any kind of trouble because I know you have an article coming out potentially this weekend on Florida and your prediction of them winning the national championship. I'm just curious if you can expand on that a little bit, because one of the things that you were talking about off air was the quality of certainly their defense and how you feel that. I believe they have, I think he's in middle school. I can't remember how old the defensive coordinator is, but he's got an opportunity here. And you feel that this could be, as you say, their year. And I'm just wondering if you'd let the people know about that.
Can I answer the question that you directed to Paul?
I don't know.
Yes. I think if Florida or everywhere else, the coaches want to see which guys show up with pads that they know that they can playing around in the summer. Like the summer, they do a lot of their who are we going to build around this year? What do we need to develop? What new tweaks do we need to, workshop for the fall? And they're going to base a lot of that off the fall, off the spring. But Florida, I'll just say this. I kind of think Napier's a little better than people think. They were decent last year on offense, inherited a tough situation. He's going to be in year 3. And I thought Grant Mertz was actually pretty effective in their scheme last year. So I just think there's a chance that they have a leap in them, and that some of the positives have been obscured by just a brutal schedule and some of their tumult on defense. Like the guy you referenced that they promoted to defensive coordinator mid-year last year is this guy that I think is younger than any of us. That was one of Billy Napier's GAs at Louisiana or something. So I don't know. I don't know if they're going to be great. I think they'd have to be really good even to win 9 games because of their schedule. But I think for Texas fans, I would caution against just scratching a W next to that.
Paul, Ian has exposed his neck here and giving you a wide open shot. I mean, he's calling for a total turnaround at Florida. That's what I'm hearing. What are your thoughts on Florida next year?
Their schedule's just prohibitive. It's brutal.
Okay.
And okay. I mean, they're gonna. So for them to go to a bowl game, they have to start the year 5-1, because the down stretch of their schedule is crazy. They're playing Texas, they're playing Georgia, they're playing Florida State. I think Ole Miss. It's crazy. They have some of these games in Gainesville, but it's just going to be tough sledding. That's a great job. And what's interesting is when a job does fall on the rocks a little bit, or you have an in-state rival that's obscuring you, like Florida State's resurgence, I think people undersell how good a job Florida is. And, people used to do that a decade ago with Georgia. I would always, do these off-season things of, hey, here are the 10 best jobs in college football. If you threw open every job, where would you want to go start your program? And I'd always have Georgia in my top 6 or 7 or something. Like, people are like, Georgia, what are you talking about? They haven't done anything. And it's just like, guys, if they ever get it together, and we know what Florida can be because we have seen them when they have it together. So I think this is probably Napier's last year, and I think they're going to make a change. The interesting thing to me is who they go after. And because I think it's a terrific job. To me, it's a top 10 college football job. So, but to Ian's point, it's not like they're scrubs. They've got talent there. They've just been disorganized. Graham Mertz actually proved to be a lot better than anyone thought. I mean, I'm guilty of that too. I kind of mocked that they got him in the portal, and he played well as sort of a control, game manager. Very few turnovers. But yeah, I mean, I think Ian's right to caution that they're going to be teams like Florida, Kentucky. It'll be a football game for a while. You don't want to just pencil that in as a W.
Well, thank God for our friend Brett Nelson, who is just frankly keeping us alive, not only with the super chat. Please send those in. Not only does it give us the opportunity to spend someone else's money, it gives us a question to answer. And this one has to do with the Duncanville quarterback, Russell. What are our thoughts in terms of that recruitment moving forward, Eric?
It's been interesting. Sark hasn't really entertained the thought of taking a 2-quarterback high school class in his time at Texas, but this would be the year to do it probably because you really want to keep 4 around if you can. They're going to lose Quinn Ewers after this year, almost certainly, right? Then you've got Arch Manning, Trey Owens, and KJ Lacey, who's committed now. So that's only 3. I doubt they'd want to go to the portal because you're not going to really find anybody outside of a clipboard holder that wants to go in a coaching career. That will want to come to Texas because everybody knows it's Arch's job. So I could see it being a guy like Keelan Russell, and the reason you like that is he does have a lot of upside. He needs a long time to fill out, but he really likes Texas. I could see him staying the course and buying into playing a little bit, waiting his turn a little bit more than just going to SMU and trying to be the man immediately. It wouldn't surprise me if they did. And obviously, there's always the added factor that he's the quarterback for DeCorian Moore. So, I mean, do they need that as added incentive later in the recruiting process for DeCorian? Maybe, but they like Keelan, obviously. Had they not taken KJ Lacey when they did early and they needed a quarterback right now, I think they'd be all over him. But now I think they're just weighing their options.
Rick has a question regarding national punditry and the spring portal. This is obviously a time where kids are going to get a sense, at least, of where they're falling in the program, whether going to be someone that stays in the program a little bit longer, or they might actually have an opportunity to develop there. Rick is pointing out that some of the national punditry is suggesting that this portal in particular in the spring could be I'm not just going to paraphrase, absolutely buck wild. What are your thoughts on that? Are there any players in particular on Texas's roster that we might need to be concerned about? I'm not suggesting that we have to give names now because I don't think that's the right thing to do. But do you see in what you're hearing there might be some players we might want to be worried about or concerned about?
I'm hearing a lot more background noise than I'm hearing noise on that as far as Texas guys going in the portal. I'm not super worried about it. They have to make some room, right? I mean, they're over the number right now. So there's going to be some needed attrition just to stay at 85 in August. I don't think they're going to lose anybody that they absolutely need or is projected to start. They could lose a valuable player that's on the 2 deep or a talented guy that would be a starter in a year or two. I don't anticipate a big loss, but you never know, man. I don't know. It's impossible to know everything on this. You don't know who's back channeling these players. You don't know who has a relationship that pre-exists when the player got to Texas. As far as just the overall volatility of the spring portal, it's going to be more volatile than we've seen previous spring portals for sure. I think that's a given. I think that's there's going to be a carryover from how wild December and January were. There's going to be like players that feel like they missed the boat on opportunities to go cash in elsewhere. There's a lot of coaching turnover that happened later that maybe the existing talent doesn't jive with the new coaches and they're going to look for a fresh start. And then, of course, there's always back channeling and all those things that could lead to guys just wanting to go earn. That's it. That's the bottom line. These guys want to make money, and they're going to go where the grass is greener.
At what point? Go ahead. Sorry.
You got to wonder how much of that is like Alabama is loading up the cannon because their staff came in so late. And if they want to rebuild that roster from they got pillaged right after Nick Saban left. And you know that Alabama's not going to want to go quietly into the night. So you wonder if maybe Alabama is just got their sights set on prominent players from around the country that they're going to try to poach. And then there's like, some new staffs that had a chance this spring that maybe people are hearing it hasn't gone very well. I don't want to speculate on who that would be because I haven't heard that. But you just wonder if these guys are hearing about chatter at different programs like that Eric was suggesting that have had more recent turnover. I don't think that's likely to be a reflection on Texas.
Everybody's watching Michigan. Everybody's trying to see if Michigan got their affairs in order. Obviously, what's terrible for Michigan is that SEC you can't transfer within the SEC. So people are going to be going after Michigan's players because, that's one of the few schools that has talent that is worthy of playing at some of the top schools in the SEC. So we're going to learn a lot about what changes Michigan has made in the absence of Jim Harbaugh.
I'd like to bring up a question from Chris Condon. He's asking about Keelan Russell, particularly. He's claiming that the kid's an alpha and has a cerebral mind set to dominate. We can talk about him, or we can talk about this new concept that we have in the world of separating men into different phylum or genus and phylum. We've got our alphas, our betas, all the different donations of men now, which I think is not only absurd, just asinine. But let's talk about Russell. Do we think he is
that's who we were
going after?
That's who they were asking about a minute ago, the Duncanville quarterback, Keelan Russell. Yeah, I mean, we're going to see. Nobody ever talks about the middle, between the alphas and the betas, which I think is like, probably 90% of America.
Well, it's probably 100% of America, but people don't want to claim that they're a chi.
Well, even like everybody would assume Ian's a beta because of, he's kind of I don't know, he's a little goofy at times, but Ian is mentally stronger than most people I know. So that's I would consider he's an alpha in some ways. And it's don't judge a book by its cover. But if I had to fist fight somebody, Ian might be on the short list. That's just how it goes. Keelan's got good mental makeup. He's got a lot of upside, a lot of passing talent, getting bigger, stronger, good leadership intangibles. KJ Lacey has a lot of good leadership intangibles, natural passer, not nearly as big. I think he's probably got a stronger arm than Keelan, despite the size difference. But, we're going to see how it plays out. Sark, it's hard pressed to find me ever worrying about quarterback with Sark. I think he's in a good place. But like I said, you want to carry more than 4. At the same time, who your starter is, barring injuries, for the next 2 years. After Quinn, the next 3 years actually. So, he might try to run it a little thin at the position and put reserves elsewhere.
Ian, do you have anything to respond there? I totally understand if you don't. I mean, Eric just said if he had to choose someone to punch in the face, he would.
No,
prefer it to be you. I mean, obviously, I'm paraphrasing here, but that's ostensibly what he just said.
Eric's a little bigger than me, is what he's getting at.
Oh, right, right.
I'm not an enormous person.
Speaking of enormous people, let's talk O-line here for a second.
Okay.
With a group that is so well established in terms of a position group, like we have a very good idea, certainly on our 1s and 2s there. How would the team want to run through spring practice, especially, we talked a lot about this being a longer timeline of development with that particular position group. How do you keep them engaged? How do you keep them involved? And how do you keep those guys from jumping into the portal?
Well, one thing they can do is just rotate now and not necessarily show their hand. Like if coaches don't want a guy to transfer, they can always just rotate who plays where, get guys first string reps here and there, or maybe at positions that the players would like to see themselves at in the spring, and not make it obvious like what the pecking order is going to be until after the portal window is closed.
I mean, that's part of it, but they're having robust and real competition too. I mean, it's DJ Campbell's going to start. We know that. And Jake Major's going to start. Cam Williams is likely going to start. I'm watching that left guard position because, Cole Hudson could theoretically start there, and DJ Campbell or Neto Umeozulu could theoretically start there. Now, people I talk to tend to think Hayden's going to hold on to it. But I think that's a little bit more of an old Mac Brown mindset in which, the guy started, so he's going to keep starting. I'm not so sure about that. We'll see.
Well, with that in mind, this goes back to a little bit of the, Ted Cruz, Nick Saban bromance that we're starting to see, but they're talking about this idea of development and whether that is actually a driving factor in bringing kids in. And I have to imagine that at some point during this new NIL era, kids are going to actually start about caring, if they're not already, getting into the league. So when you get to these higher level programs, I would have to imagine that when you're in a system like that, especially when you've got Kyle Flood, you've got this whole system working through, that these kids actually care about staying in the program and getting developed so they can move forward. Paul, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's most likely to happen on the O-line from a dispositional standpoint. O-line are the most realistic of any guy typically on a football field in terms of their estimation of their own abilities and those of their teammates. And they're also hierarchical. Like young O-line understand 95% of the time, unless they're very special, they shouldn't be out on the field, right? Now, they may have recruiting quotes, and everyone's going to hit me with those when a guy's a junior or something in high school, and their ambitions, I'm going to start as a freshman, to be All-American, and I'll be out by my junior year, and I'll be a first-round draft pick. And then they get to the campus, and they go against Tavondre Sweat in a one-on-one, and they're like, okay, I guess I got to go get strong, and this is going to be a 3-year project, right? So the contrast is that a wide receiver, back when we carried 14 wide receivers or whatever it was under Tom Herman, your 14th wide receiver, who was 4th on the depth chart, believed in his heart of hearts that if he could have just gotten out on the field, Texas would have won the game, and he would have balled out, right? O-line are self-deprecating. They make fun of each other. They're good at establishing a hierarchy. Now, where it gets complicated is when you've got a really talented guy who's not quite there yet technically, right? So Neto Umeozulu, there's a lot of programs that would love to have that guy on their team because he's got a lot of potential. Cole Hudson, so that's why I think the anointment of Hayden Connor, I'm with Eric. I'm holding off on that one. It really depends on what they value in the offense, because Hayden is a good pass protector. But if one of those guys can offer comparable pass protection, but then bring a lot more athleticism and a little bit more explosiveness, I think that you're going to have to look at Hayden maybe as the 6th offensive lineman. But, offensive line, more than any other position group, is more willing to let it shake out over time. And if you're Kyle Flood, you could be square with these guys. It's not just about dangling hope. You can actually say, hey, man, you're in the running. And a lot can happen over the summer. Go get stronger. Go work on this. Go work on your drop step. And then we'll see you in August. Go try to win a job. Like, it's open. No one here is being anointed. I mean, we know that there's 3 guaranteed starters: Kelvin Banks, Jake Majors, DJ Campbell. Those other 2 jobs, in whatever permutation it takes, it's wide open. And if anyone thinks that someone who just started last year is going to automatically inherit, I don't think that's our program. I don't think that's how it works. I'll be honest.
Staying on that side of the ball and actually contrasting it with what we've got going on the other side of the ball. Is this the year, Ian, where Texas might be a more offensive team than they are a defensive team? I mean, last year our defense really balled out in a lot of positions. That's not to say the offense didn't play well, but it was something we absolutely had to hang our hat on. Is this year that the offense maybe edges out the defense and keeps us in games more?
It sure looks like it. The way Sark talks about this team, you get a little bit of that sense. Some of the practice reports that we've had seem to indicate that the offense, like the first team offense, is really effective early. Some of that, the defense has a lot to replace, and they'll probably figure out things that they haven't figured out yet. But, just when you look at the talent on the team and the draft talent across the offense, there's so much of it. There's got to be some comment here that Eric is just laughing at.
They're giving Paul some grief about his Malcolm Gladwell hatred. Let's call it what it is. It's just vitriol.
It is unabashed hatred. It's true.
Hey,
Yeah, okay.
Good news. Good news. Cam Williams is on his 9,999th kick step. So one more.
He hits 10,000.
One more, and he's your starter.
It's a magical number based on violinists in Vienna, even though he got the study wrong.
All right. Sorry, Ian. Sorry.
Well, yeah, I mean, they have Quinn Ewers, they have this veteran line, and then they reloaded the skill talent with up-and-coming talent in the portal. If this team isn't scoring, 40 points a game.
200. Oh, sorry.
If they're not scoring like 40 points a game, something probably went wrong. And when you can do that, you have a lot of leeway on defense. And I the sense I get, and maybe Paul or Eric disagree, I kind of doubt it, is that this team is going to want to be like an offensive-driven team that defensively figures out how to get situational stops when they need them, but otherwise the offense is kind of going to carry the team.
Isn't that, I mean, Paul, isn't that essentially Sark's MO? I mean, we all understand we hear the press conferences. Of course, everybody wants a balanced team, but I think genuinely, if Sark had his druthers, I mean, he would just absolutely demolish teams on the scoreboard and run it up so the defense wasn't necessarily even that much of a factor. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, but you also have to consider he doesn't play fast. Right. Which is a cheap way that overpowering offenses do pile points on poor to above average defenses. Right. He doesn't do that. And he is pretty big on, he doesn't just give lip service to special teams and to defense and stuff like that. I think he likes, he was on those USC teams, right? He saw that how good they were when they had the Wild Boys, defensive line, and they had dominant defense and it complemented the offense. I mean, he understands what it looks like. So yeah, he doesn't take some of those shortcuts. Would he love to have an offense that absolutely destroys people? Absolutely. I mean, that's what he's building towards. And I think the thing that maybe supports Ian's contention is we're going to lose some really good draftable talent on offense, right? Jatavian Sanders, Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell. I mean, dude, these guys are going to go really high, and those were sort of the stars. And, of course, Jonathan Brooks is going to go really high despite his knee injury. But I think people may underestimate the incremental benefit of your quarterback and your O-line returning. That really makes a difference, not only for Sark, but college football in general. And you just make a lot fewer drive-killing mistakes when you bring those guys back. So even though you have the upside of these incredible athletes outside and carrying the ball, just that ability to have this really high floor consistently, and then you add, talented guys like Bond and guys like Moore develop and Jonte Cook, et cetera. I don't have to tell everybody the players, but I think people underestimate the degree to which bringing back your quarterback on your offensive line it's not as sexy, but it leads to just much more precise and just sort of mistake-free offense, at least as close as you can get to that. And really, that's the thing that derails offense, particularly a good one like Sark's in Texas. It's 2nd and 17, 2nd and 14. That's what kind of derails you. But when you don't make those mistakes, when you don't have dumb errors, dumb turnovers, it's going to be a hard offense to get off the field. And that's going to be, I think, appealing to Sark.
They're likely to be better at that, but still maintain the explosiveness because of what they were able to add at wide receiver in the transfer portal. Plus, maybe Jonte Cook ends up being up there as well. But just that combination is, I mean, think about how many points Texas would have scored last year if they were good in the red zone.
Yeah.
I mean,
going back to Paul's point about Sark being, not giving short shrift to special teams and defense, he's sort of a total football coach. He will take the air out of the ball late in the game and try to run it. I mean, that's how they iced Alabama. He's not that could put a cap on point expectations is he's not afraid to put the ball in his running back's hands and ice the game for long stretches of time. I mean, the last 7 minutes versus Alabama, when they had Bijan and Roschon, they iced some teams, didn't pass much in the fourth quarter. I think the offensive line is humming, and the running backs are as good as we think. That you might not see many high scoring fourth quarters.
We got a super chat from our friend Huff Tex, and we're gonna move. Obviously, this is something that Paul was just talking about, losing a lot of relatively high draft players for us this year. Moving forward, obviously Quinn is going to be on this list, but who are our draftable players in 2025? And are we potentially going to have the most that we've had since 1983? This is a fun history question for Ian. Obviously, Huff Tex thinks the answer is yes.
I think they're going to have more draftable players in 2024 than in 2025, actually.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So I would go, it'll be 1 year, but he gave us $10. So, and we appreciate that. He's a great poster. He's a meathead. He's a weightlifter. We like that. But we've talked about this before, but the early round draft picks on offense next year, Kelvin Banks, Quinn Ewers, Isaiah Bond, Gunnar Helm won't be early, but he'll be drafted, I think. Let me see. Perhaps Matthew Golden, if he's healthy. And already we're drawing straws on offense. So defense, you're not going to have the defensive tackles that you think. Barron Sorrell will get drafted. I feel confident about that, just because he's hard to push around. Let me see. David
in 1983, didn't they used to have like 20 rounds though?
No, they had 12 rounds. Yeah, so that's an important distinction. There were 12 rounds in the NFL draft back then. There's now 7, I believe.
Yeah, 7.
So that even if you equalize it, that 1983 class was just ridiculous. It's infamous, like how many dudes Texas had drafted. It was just nuts. But I think I'm with Eric. I think 2024 will be the most that we've had. Mac Brown teams, I seemed like there were always 5 to 7, the good ones. But I don't remember an explosive year we had like 10 or even 14, like Bama and Georgia and LSU do of late.
Yeah, it was even lower than you'd think. I think 5 was the upwards end for most of those years.
Well, and then sadly, part of that was you could kind of get a deal on good Texas players who were getting like a Texas discount because there was a perception that these guys were not being developed. So you had multiple Texas free agents going to the league and having great tenure of NFL careers, Adrian Phillips being one of them.
Do we think some of the questions that were coming in the chat here is, do we think Blue goes in the draft?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good one to name. Yeah, I think he might run for 800 yards next year, but it's going to be on not a lot of carries.
Right.
Super explosive, got good hands. The NFL loves running backs that can catch out of the backfield. So that's going to be a big selling point for him. DJ Campbell, I mean, he'd love to. He's got a long way to go technically. He's got to become more assignment sound. He's definitely got the athleticism and the physicality to do it. He's got to put it all together. Is he going to put it together this offseason? That remains to be seen. Auburn's not going to get drafted.
What do you mean? Why not? He's like super cool.
Yeah.
Why would you? I mean,
hey, that guy should be a Texas legend. He's put Texas ahead in very dire moments where they had or tied games where they had no business coming back into it. Alabama at home a couple years ago, he gave them the lead. Texas Tech on the road. He should be a legend. They went on to lose like 3 of those games. So to me, he's a legend. But I don't know that he has the leg that the NFL is looking for. But he does have the consistency. And he's pretty good between 40 and 50 yards.
Kickers get degrees before they go.
Oh, okay. All right.
I mean, just because their earnings are, there's usually very little impetus for them to get out.
Yeah.
So they might as well maximize NIL and degree and whatever else.
What's working, man? Paul might know this. Paul's a little older than me. So Refrigerator Perry went to Clemson, came on the stage in 85. I don't know if 83 was the invention of Refrigerator Perry, but I am old enough to remember I was 7 years old in 85. That was when he kind of took the country by storm, similar to the Icky Shuffle a few years later.
Yeah, he was in the first round of the 85 draft. And he was a rookie. And the big issue, talk about how football has changed. Oh my God. The big issue with Refrigerator Perry was Buddy Ryan was furious about his weight. Because William Perry weighed 310, 315 pounds when he showed up to rookie camp, guys. And that's acceptable. Could you imagine? Like, just it's completely different. So people may not remember that amazing 85 Bears defense. Steve McMichael played NFL interior defensive line at about 275.
Yep.
Dan Hampton was 270. Richard Dent was actually a big defensive end. He's like 260, 265. And then Refrigerator Perry was a giant fat guy. And that was the joke because he weighed over 300 pounds.
I use that to talk about the evolution of man. You can see it. I go to a high school now and I'll see 5 guys bigger than him. It's crazy. That's, he took the world by storm being that big. Now you go anywhere and you'll see guys that size.
Well, and Eric, as a recruiting guru, you know that if a guy is 300 pounds in high school, he's college ready.
Yeah.
I read that in every scouting report.
Oh, man.
What do we, and I know we kind of touched on this, but I think it's, let's just answer the people's questions. What are our thoughts on, could Cam Williams be a one and done guy? Do we see that? Obviously, we talked about with Barron. What about Collins? What about Terrence? What are our thoughts on these gents?
Cam has a lot of quickness for his size, but just the other day, that's something we should probably talk about. Is there's a lot of excitement about the speed at edge rush that they have. It's increased obviously with Colin and Trey Moore, and even though Ethan Burke, you wouldn't really call him a super quick guy, he can get to the quarterback in a hurry because of his length. Colton Vasek was mentioned as well. So Cam is getting a little bit more. He's getting some tests based on that the speed element. So I think that's going to be a question mark for him this season. How does he do against quickness? Because we know he's going to do all right against bigger guys. You can't really beat him inside. You can't run through him. But around the edge is going to be the question for him. But, if he puts his run blocking together, he's got some really good quickness moving downhill. He looks really comfortable with his weight as a run blocker. I'm not so sure he has that same level of comfort with his weight transfer as a pass protector yet. But, we'll see. I mean, if he puts it all together, yeah, he can get drafted. Maybe not the first round, second round. Who knows? But we'll see how that plays out. Paul's mentioned this. We've mentioned this before. Is that we don't really know who's going to break out. It's early for that. We'll have a better idea in August, but even in August, we might not know.
Following me and Paul's theory has been that Cam Williams is like Phil Lodeholt or Adrian Ely or Darrell Williams or these huge guys that Oklahoma's had for years and years. Yeah. And those guys usually spend 4 or 5 years in college before they go pro. Because they didn't need technique in high school. So that's usually comes kind of slow. Maybe the weight has to be totally disciplined and submitted to their football goals and things like that. So I don't know if it's usually more like a guy like Kelvin Banks or Sam Cosme, who's like 6'5", long, natural 310, or like work their way to 310 and are just like freak athletes. Those are the guys that usually are like 3 and out.
Yep.
One of the things that we look for when we're building a spring program is developing some adversity for the players so we can test what their mettle is. And I think it's important. It would be something that I would like to hear at least is when you're working with a group of guys and one of the people you've been working with a long time says that you essentially have a very punchable face. I'm curious, Ian, how are you able to maintain your composure and still work through that and develop high quality content?
Well, he looks like he's hydrating for a fight.
Well, I mean, you've definitely thrown down the gauntlet, Eric.
Either a fight or Tom Herman's going to give him a urinalysis tomorrow.
Oh,
yeah, I made my weight earlier, so now I gotta get it back in time for my flight down to Eric's house tomorrow.
Oh, wow, you're going to him? This is full service. It's amazing. It's very kind of you.
Tyson versus Jake Paul. Expect that there's going to be no consequences. You don't do that.
Tyson versus Jake Paul undercard right here.
Guys, that could be a murder. I mean, we might actually being paid.
That fight's not going to happen.
Watch a murder.
I refuse to believe that fight's going to take place.
Oh my gosh. I mean,
I assume those are all fixed. So
yeah. But wow. Ian reminds me of my best friend. My best friend is a little undersized as well. but he's
Someone you
extremely
also
crafty.
wanted to punch.
He's. I would never punch him. I would never punch Ian either. Now, I don't punch anybody. It's been a while.
Eric, your best friend is your wife. This is weird.
Wow. All right.
It's weird that you spar with her.
Hey, look, man, that's not our place, dude.
I'm not one of those. My wife is my best friend guys, because
I always like the retort to that, which is, well, my wife would let me go to a strip. I mean, my best friend would let me go to a strip club.
But the other side is, you have to say something like, I love making love to my best friend, and that sounds terrible too.
Yeah. Well, again, guys, this is really not my place, but I appreciate your vulnerability here. I think this has been an excellent opportunity for you to just express what's on your minds. I do have a question for you again, Eric. What type of skiing do you like to do? You're very keen on staging your scene, making sure that skis are in there. I'm just curious, are you more of a Nordic guy or downhill? What's your deal?
I just like to cruise now. Now I'm afraid when I hit high speeds. That's something that really ticked me off a couple of years ago. It's the first time I ever said, hey, I should slow down a little bit. I might get hurt. So now I'm just trying to stay upright. And I bought the wrong skis due to a shared friend between me and Paul. He talked me into these rockets, and they're very fast. So I just go slow these days and try to cruise. They're just there because they make me happy.
Oh, that's nice. That's really good.
Thanks.
Really good.
We're in the
I'm
trust
really
tree.
happy that we had this opportunity. Let's see. So yes, there is a bunch of background noise. We need to express this. One of the things that Ian is doing, I got to tell you, in the off season, he works at the drive-thru at the local Dunkin' in East Rutherford, and he's just got to make sure that he can get his vocals up to the specs that they need in order if you're going to order an iced latte or maybe some crawlers. So yes, the sound quality is a little bit off. We're going to be discussing that with Ian later, and we appreciate you pointing that out. Everyone, thank you for that. Before we get going, is there anything in particular? Let's see, UT Boy is here. I guess we should somehow notify the authorities. Great. All right. Spring ball is in the air. We've got a spring game on April 20th. A lot is going to happen between now and then. How many more padded practices should we anticipate before the spring game, Eric?
Oh, padded practices. I'm not sure. He'll have a couple scrimmages. They'll mix it up like they do in the season. A couple without pads, and then they'll go. He'll just change speeds on it. But yeah, I expect they'll have a Friday padded practice this week. He'll probably go pretty hard before they give him a break until Monday afternoon, and they hit the field again next Tuesday. But it's kind of just at Sark's whim. He's going to have the pulse of his team and see if he needs to dial it up or dial it down.
Ian, if you had to bet one of your children, the one that you don't like, which one, not which child, but do you think that we have 1,000-yard rusher this year?
I think so. It seems like Sark usually likes to lean on one guy when he has it. So I feel like Baxter may be the guy they would like to be the volume guy. And I think Blue also has an outside shot of getting to 1,000 just because he's so explosive. And I think he'll get worked into the offense a lot. So, I mean, they almost have the profile of a team that would have like 2 800-yard guys.
Right.
But I think they'll get at least one of them to 1,000. I think it's possible they could get 2 guys to 1,000 this year, just depending on if there are blowouts and who gets carries in those blowouts.
There's going to be 1,000-yard guy, and especially if Texas plays 14 or 15 games, right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
It gets easier. I mean, it used to be a big deal in the NFL, right, to be a 1,000-yard rusher when it was a 14-game season. And then 16-game season, it meant you averaged, 62.5 yards per game. You just didn't get injured. And now you have to average, just at 60 yards per game if you can play all 17. So it's not quite the rare error it used to be in college. Obviously, it was rare error back when you had the 11 regular season game, right? And for whatever reason, bowl games didn't count. Do you guys remember that? Like your career rushing statistics, they wouldn't count your bowl games. And then all of a sudden they changed that and they started counting it. But yeah, I think the more games you play, obviously they have a higher probability. I also just think that you're likely to have one of the major 2 guys get dinged up. So one guy will have the 150 rushing, you have a couple 150-yard rushing games, and getting to 1,000 is not quite as daunting. So I think they'll get there, and I don't know. I think it might be Blue. We'll see.
Yeah, it could happen where Baxter gets to start again. He's got to prove that he can stay healthy. He was battling myriad injuries last year. It wasn't just one. So maybe that's something that we need to watch for next year. And then, if Blue gets a crease, just like on the field, if Blue gets a crease, he's not going to look back. So it could happen where similar to how Brooks had his breakout when Baxter, wasn't able to stay on the field.
What is the over-under on how many games we see Arch in this year?
I'm going to say 5.
I was going to say 4.5. But,
4.5.
Yeah, I'll say 4.5.
I'm assuming that's pretty front-loaded.
Well, you gotta assume that Quinn might miss a game or two in the SEC slate because he has for the last 2 years. So if that happens, then you have that plus whatever the front-loaded games are that Eric is referencing.
Okay. Well, that was a really fun question. I'm really glad I asked.
Quinn could get hurt, and then you're going to have blowouts. There's going to be some blowouts. So
what's not fun about that betting the under, right? No one wants to. If we posted those odds and took odds on Inside Texas, no one would take the under, right? Because it's not fun.
Right. All right, gentlemen, we have reached 46 past the hour. It is well past my bedtime. I know young Ian has to get his microphone fixed. So we want to thank you all for joining us tonight. If you have any further questions or things that you would like to expand on, please check out InsideTexas.com. Still $1 for the first month. After that, it's free. That's what Ian pays for. So check us out, InsideTexas.com. We want to thank you all for being here. We've really enjoyed this time with you.